All right. Hello. Welcome back to Hosted Bar. This is the week where Don and I talk about our last guest. But before we get started, Don, what are you drinking? And then what are your initial thoughts?
Yeah, well, I'm drinking it's a tequila hibiscus and a blackberry seltzer water. I haven't tried it yet. I'm hoping this combination will taste good, but I usually like this tequila with just like regular club soda, so it's good. Um, but yeah, oh my gosh, so many different takeaways with Brandon. I'm so glad that I thought of him and asked him on the show because I thought it would be really fun. But
Mhm.
first, I want to know too, what are you drinking right now?
Oh, well, I am super fancy. Actually, it's pretty good. It's ginger beer and Seedlip Garden 108.
What's that?
So Seedlip is a non-alcoholic mixer. So it's
Oh,
supposed to take the place of like gin. It doesn't taste like gin, but you would put it in places where you would have gin or something like that instead. And
okay.
so it's a mocktail of sorts, but it's green and fragrant, and it just tastes good. Plus, I'm a sucker for ginger beer.
Awesome. Well, I love it. Well, what takeaways did you have? I mean, like start it off. You kick it off. What kind of takeaways did you have with Brandon?
Sure. So yeah, for those who remember, we talked to Brandon Rounds, and we were talking a lot about kind of his interesting life, both at work and when he's not at work, and how do you kind of blend the two or not blend the two. And one of the things that I really liked is that so he's a drag queen, right? And it's very much a part of his life, very important. And he talks about it at work, and he's willing to do it, but so it's not that he is hiding it from everyone, but he also isn't it's not the main part where he's at work, like it's not just like they see Brandon, not his persona, right? And he doesn't try and
Yeah.
that, but that work is super supportive and lets him be himself. So kind of like how you can be yourself without being like in your face. I don't know how to put it, but like, yeah, I just like that you can have a robust work life, robust outside of work life, not hide them, and but not have to always be on.
Yeah. And that I loved to hear how the chamber's so supportive of him and
Hmm.
too they do different events and try and he's working with the different community like businesses too, where it's like they're embracing it. And, I
Yeah.
think like too, like how he said too, he's an advocate for others and helping spread the word and energy to other people. And that's the part that I just really loved hearing more of. And, you know, I don't want to say like he put a different mask on, depending on where he is, but he's kind of like too, he's being himself no matter what
Right. He's being
situation.
himself, but he doesn't have that doesn't mean that you are always the exact same.
Yeah.
Right. And I thought it was really interesting when he was talking about a lot of his other performers, like this is their chance to be somebody else, like how they could be very introverted or very um shy, but once they put on their kind of drag queen persona, that's when they kind of allow themselves to be all out. And so there are definitely people who are much more bifurcated, I
Hmm.
guess, in their approach than he is. And again, I think it's always interesting that it allows people to do what they need. And I loved how he was talking about how the community is diverse. You don't have to be a gay man dressing up. You can actually be a woman in drag. You can be trans in drag. And you can also I knew that you could be that there's a thing where uh women at birth can dress up in drag as men. I have a friend who does that.
Okay.
But I never heard of women dressing up in like the heels and hair and like his version of drag. And I was like, ooh, so how much of a thing is this? Because I have some high
Yeah.
heels. I
New
love
thing.
getting wigs.
We could tape a new episode of us doing different things, trying out stuff. Um, well, and that's where I loved too that I had a lot of people reach out to me like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you interviewed Brandon," or "I had no idea," or, so it was like getting traction and, and that's, I think, too, the overall goal is to help educate other people and we're getting educated and, I learned some new things that I didn't know or wasn't aware of. And that's the part that I always love of meeting new people and all the different things that sometimes we don't have. I feel like sometimes I almost have my blinders on where I don't realize what's going on sometimes outside of my zone.
Right now, one thing you had talked about, kind of even going into that, is being okay with asking questions.
Mhm.
And we talked a little bit about that. Now, how do you feel now about knowing when to ask, knowing how to ask? Is it like, did you gain any insight about that?
Yeah, I think it was just like really good reminders about, just even using they or them. Or I even saw a video this other week. I feel like my phone and our computer is always listening to us. But anyways, where it was this older man and he was getting interviewed and he said, "You should just call everybody love.
Is
Like, you know, how are you doing today, love?" And it's
he
just too
British?
like
That sounds very
letting
British.
right. And I think he was too British, but it's just the point of no matter what or who or him, her, she, whatever. It's just like you got to show that you care about people. And I think that's the part too, where to remind all of us that some people are okay having conversations about things and are willing to have those discussions, and other people still are uncomfortable. And I think that's no matter what in life, there's boundaries. But it kind of, that's kind of why when I reached out to Brandon, I'm like, I'm not sure if you're comfortable about this or not or what. And I think it was just a good opportunity too for me to ask him, but also to hear him talk about it.
I think your point there is really, really well taken. Of the ask them if they're okay to be asked questions.
Yeah.
Right? Don't assume one way or the other. Just ask. Hey, can I ask you a bunch of questions? Can I not?
Yeah.
So I have a friend, Vivian, who she's trans, and I was just like, Vivian, like, I'm gonna ask you all the weird, awkward questions that I have a million of. And she's like, great, because that means you care.
Hmm.
Right. And I'll answer the ones I want to answer. I'm like, great. Right.
Yeah.
And so, but I was like, is that okay? Because if it's not okay, I don't want to, I don't want to offend, but I also want to know. And I think a lot of times people are like, I want to know, but maybe they're not comfortable. Like maybe Brandon says some people are just not comfortable with it. And so, okay, that's fine.
Hmm.
Um, that's another thing that we've been talking a lot at our firm is there are people who are sharers, right? They will share
Everything.
everything and you don't even have to ask. And there are those that aren't. And
Hmm.
you can't read into one versus the other. Just because people aren't sharing doesn't mean they don't care. Just because they're sharing doesn't mean that they're drama queens.
Yeah.
It's just how different people process what they're doing.
Yeah. I would say I felt, even through this whole like COVID time, let's just even say, where I think it just even too gave me a different perspective on things where, I guess I've kind of opened up more about just my own personal life. And I feel that sometimes it's not only a healing process for like ourselves to talk about it,
Hmm.
but then, like, for me, I remember a friend telling me of like, if you tell your story or your own pain or your things that you're going through, then it reminds other people that they're not alone and maybe you'll inspire them one day. So I think there's always kind of that boundary where sometimes too, it's like it could help yourself.
Hmm.
Wonderful. Okay, if that's what you need to do, you can word vomit it out to everybody and share it. But then sometimes too, even looking at from a different perspective of, maybe if I be vulnerable right now and open up, I could really help somebody, or, make someone not feel isolated or alone, or maybe I can brighten their day, that their life really isn't as bad as they think it is. So I don't know. It's really kind of opened my eyes to different perspectives of things. And I
Yeah.
don't know what your thoughts are on that, but
I think that being authentic in their vulnerability is important.
yeah.
I think there's a lot in especially kind of influencer world where you're, oh, I'm being, uh vulnerable, but you're being vulnerable in like the most humble brag kind of way. Or
Mhm.
it can feel more more of a performance than even drag.
Yeah.
Um and they only show what they want to show. And so I think it can be important for it to be authentic with it, because yes, it can be really powerful and it can help everyone. But it has to come from that place that of authenticity and not a place of performance. And I also think it's okay to be authentically vulnerable. I think it's okay to choose to do it, but I think it has to be the person who's telling their story's choice. Right? This goes
Mm,
back to ask. Is it okay if I ask? Is it okay that I, can I hear your story and listen to that story? Like you never want to out somebody.
yeah.
Um, and you never want to force somebody to tell their story if they don't want to, right? I was at a conference a couple of weeks ago just to listen to a friend of mine speak, and everybody there was very open, and they'd spent, you know, 3 days together being in that space. And I kind of came in the last minute, and it would have been really awkward if they'd been like, Erin, you have to like speak. Cause I'm like, I don't know you people. I don't
Mhm.
like, and that's not my jam. They didn't, right? They did a good job of like people do it, but you have to let people choose. And if somebody said, pass, you have to let them pass. I think sometimes when you get into some of these things, everyone's like, no, you have to share. I'm like, no, you don't. You can. It's acceptable to share, but it's also acceptable to not.
Yeah. Not feel pressured to do it.
Right?
That's another thing too over the years of just all the different pressures, and you got to do this in order to get more marketing or be out on
Yeah.
social media, and I think that's where it's just sometimes you got to draw the line and share what you feel is helpful for other people or not.
Right. And I think Brandon does a good job of sharing a lot, but he doesn't share everything, right? Like
Mhm.
he's happy to answer questions, but he lets people know that.
Mhm.
And I think one thing he did a lot that well was, this is me. I am happy to do that. I am happy to answer. I am happy to do this. I know I have support at my work. Other people may not have that same support network. They may not have the same um comfortableness, the same openness. And so knowing that just because he's okay doesn't mean everybody in his position is in his position, um or in his mindset about it.
Yeah. It's a great reminder to all of us, no matter what, too, that not everybody, like, we're all different, and that's wonderful, and that's great, and that's where too you can't expect just because one person does it this way that their other person's going to do the same or be as open. And that's where I think even too, just how he's talking about going to the Miss Gay US of A, which by the way it is next weekend already, that he was talking about. And
Yep.
so I think that too, where he's being brave and courageous by competing and going out there and doing those things and trying to help educate and advocate for other people.
Yeah, I think
Um,
that yeah, I think sometimes we forget how hard it can be to be such a present and kind of really seen advocate, right? A lot of us
mhm.
kind of, oh yeah, we're allies, we're supportive, but we're not putting ourselves out there.
Yeah,
So he hears all the good and all the bad,
yeah. Hmm.
and to be able to be that, um, just that scene can be hard, and whether that's because he's advocating for drag or LGBTQ or anybody. It's even hard to just advocate for yourself, right? When you go, when we were back in employee days, going to your boss and just advocating for yourself or whatever, it can be really, real to really put yourself out there.
Yeah. And I feel like, even just as we're talking about it, it's like that's where I think even me with this whole entrepreneurship life of that's where I feel like I've been hiding because I'm nervous of the perspectives maybe that people will have. It could be good, it could be negative, it could be you just don't know. And I think that's where sometimes it almost hinders us from showing up as our best self or hindering us from taking action sometimes.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Like, because he has such a supportive work, he he knows he has that kind of fallback, and he knows he can do that. And sometimes when you're working on your own, you don't have that same, you're your own support network.
Mhm. You're your
You don't
own
have to go to
community.
your boss to ask if something's okay, but you also don't have your boss to be like, "Yay, you."
Yeah. Yeah. I would say now I feel like too, since we put that out there, that I shared it. Now I feel like I'm getting a ton of things on my feed. And two, it's great because even today, someone reached out to me like, can you help introduce me to Brandon? Because we were thinking about doing a drag queen bingo sometime. Like, would you help introduce them? Like, of course. Like, that's what I love doing. But I love that, just from our interview with him, not only did we learn,
Mhm.
others got to learn more awareness, spreading out the word about it, and I think that's the point of too, like why we're doing this. But I love it though too, just because I keep seeing it and it keeps popping up and I keep hearing things, and that's pretty cool. And just seeing him getting ready to go to Texas is pretty fun too.
And it all came because you were concerned about, can we ask this? And you did exactly what we were saying. You asked if we could ask,
Yeah. So
right?
hopefully even our listeners, get inspired of maybe there's things you want to learn or two asking for
Mhm.
support or asking to learn more or asking for help, it can be a challenge for a lot of people.
It can, and another thing that this all goes to like feeling awkward, right?
Mhm.
Um, and how a lot of times we let that stop us. But and if you had let feeling awkward stop you, you wouldn't have had all of that upside.
Mhm.
And another thing that a lot of us feel awkward about is it's kind of weird. We feel awkward about being nice. We feel awkward about writing a thank you note. We feel awkward about saying, "Hey, you look good today." Um, and there's been study after study that shows even those little niceties, like buoy somebody up and send ripples out,
Mhm.
when we just felt awkward about saying thank you. And so it's one of the things that I've been kind of talking to people about. Like, let's be awkward for niceness, right? Let's
Yeah.
embrace our awkward and be nice. Like, write the dumbest thank you note ever.
Yeah.
I so we were at an event earlier this week, and somebody gave me, they had leftover fizzy water, and they gave me a package of fizzy water. So I
Yeah.
wrote her a thank you note being like, thank you so much for letting me, because we had just gotten back from being out of town, and was going to need to go to the store to buy it,
Yeah.
but because she gave it to me because she didn't want to carry it home, she didn't just give me water, she gave me time.
Mm,
And I so I was like, "Oh, is that weird to write a thank you note for like fizzy water?" Yes. But so what? Like, I
yeah.
guarantee when she gets it, she's gonna be like, it'll brighten her day for a whole 2 minutes. So what?
Yeah.
Like,
Well,
getting
and that
over.
kind of, to go to a different perspective too, is you received, which is
Right.
not easy for everybody to receive, and I think that's where, to just go off of that too, of like, to receive that, and that's always been a challenge for me, of even to receive the gratitude from somebody, or to receive things when you don't always ask for it too.
Right. Oh, I'm awful at getting compliments. I get complimented on shoes. My first thing I have to say is like, "Oh, I got them on sale."
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Not
Yeah.
thank you. Or, "Oh,
Uh-huh.
yeah, I got it, off of Amazon." No, just say, "Thank you. It's okay."
Yeah. Or, "Oh, you look great today." I really don't feel that great today." Like
Right.
this, and you just like go into the spiral. Like that's me, where I'm always like, so I've been really trying to be conscious of that, of like asking for support, but also receive. Like
Yeah.
receiving is hard when we're givers, or when you give to people often. And that's to just go off of that,
Right.
made
Again,
me
you
think of
feel
that.
awkward.
Yeah, it's so awkward, and it's not something that we're always comfortable doing. And I think it's the same thing as like habits or trying new things. It's always awkward. You're always going to have an awkward stage. It's like that's why they call it the honeymoon stage when you get married, because it's awkward. Like, everything is awkward in life, as I
It's
reflect.
and so just kind of getting over that awkward, and you all of a sudden realize, "Oh, there's a lot here."
Yeah,
Right? It's like you never climb over a fence gracefully,
true.
but once you're over it, you have this whole new world to explore.
Yeah. Yeah. I think even too, like I sit and I reflect of this week, because now I'm finally been taking some steps. And I even think like today, thank you, Erin, for having me on the hosted bar, because you finally gave me the maybe the fun experience with you, and just like being me, where now I finally feel like I can show up as me. And so like doing some things that I've been dreaming of too. So I'm saying thank you today for helping push me out of my comfort zone, and getting me even in the weird spot for myself where, this is uncomfortable for me than in the past. So yeah.
I'll try to take my own advice. Thank you. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's something that we all get caught up in is our the feeling in between our own ears about being awkward, and we realize that maybe it's not as awkward as we think, or maybe the other person is feeling just as awkward. So like I said, sometimes you feel awkward giving a compliment, and then if the person blows it off, you're like, "Oh my gosh, maybe I shouldn't have done that." Whereas if they
Hmm.
just say thank you, it helps kind of both sides.
Yeah.
And so one of the things I've been, like I said, talking about and thinking about a lot is this kind of like getting over awkwardness in the face of nice. Right?
Mm.
Like, just if I'm feeling awkward, but it's a nice thing, do it anyway. So like I said, I've been really trying to do thank you notes, thank you texts, thank you things like that. So it's been something I've been focusing on this year is doing kind of the awkward thank you.
Yeah. Oh, as you cough.
Right. Uh,
Um, well, I love how we've had like, like look at where this conversation even goes. And this is where I think that's where it's so fun to get different perspective, to even go outside of our comfort zone, but also to have that time to reflect. And this is why I like this part too, because just to reflect on life, because it's
mhm.
always moving so fast, where sometimes the simple choices of your words could really affect somebody, or asking some questions could maybe make people uncomfortable, but sometimes to like deep down just show that you care, and to just um, show kindness to everybody. And that's kind of just the summary of me, of like what I'm even thinking from, of why I'm glad we had Brandon on, because he's
And
great.
And now you'll feel less awkward the next time you have to ask questions, and next feel less awkward next time someone is bringing up LGBTQ issues or drag queen issues, because you're like, oh wait, I have a background now,
Yeah.
and I know that I know that I need to ask, right? Or things like that. And I thought that was really helpful because it just makes each time a little bit easier.
Yeah. And I was saying the ripples that Brandon's making on that community and really helping and advocating for them. You know, it's like if there weren't leaders like that in the world, we would still maybe be 10 steps back, you know, and trying to understand things. And, um, I think that too, where he's very courageous. And this is where too, like sometimes if there's things you're passionate about, stand up and be the leader, even though it could be the awkward stage of life of you're the one standing up, nobody else is, but you got to lead the pack.
Right? This is important. Be
Yeah.
be willing to be awkward.
Be willing to be awkward. There you go.
All
Oh,
right. Well, any other? I think that's a great last thought from you, and I can't top it. Um, so, do you? I believe we have someone for next month, but I don't remember.
yeah.
You.
So, if my memory is right, it's Nick Pease. So, Nick Pease, I don't want to ruin all the thunder for him, but let's just say a good friend that grew up with my husband who had a pretty drastic accident where he really had to relearn a lot of things, but also gave him quite the perspective on life and really how the community chipped in, but also the change that he's made in his community of just how determined he is, where he's never given up. So I'm excited to chat with him.
So kind of resilience and uh embracing. Get back to prior thing with the man, embracing change.
Yeah,
Awesome.
yeah,
Well, that sounds exciting. I can't wait for it. And I definitely can't wait to hear your thoughts on breaking it down afterwards.
yeah. Well, thanks for having me today, and so good to see you. And I hope our listeners have some key takeaways.
To hopefully we can hear some more in comments.
And I hope Brandon wins too, by the way.
Definitely. I definitely need him. He needs to bring home the crown.
Yes, yes. Well, thank you.